What really happens the moment you die? Have you ever heard stories of people floating above their own bodies? A feeling of total peace as they drift towards a brilliant, warm light? For centuries, we've mostly dismissed these tales as hallucinations, the last gasps of a dying mind. Experiences like these are reported by people who've had a close brush with death, with some studies suggesting it's around 10% of cardiac arrest survivors. But what if they aren't just fantasy? What if these vivid, life-changing events are actually tied to something measurable happening inside us? Well, science is now revealing that in our final moments, something extraordinary takes place in the brain. It's a massive, highly organized surge of activity that could finally unlock one of humanity's greatest mysteries. What really happens when we die? The answer is turning out to be far more complex and way more fascinating than we ever thought. It's a journey to the very edge of existence, a puzzle that's forcing us to rethink the line between life and death itself. Section 1. The Final Countdown. For most of history, we thought we had death figured out. The heart stops, the lungs stop, and the brain, starved of oxygen, goes silent forever. Biologically, it's a domino effect. As oxygen runs out, the brain scrambles, desperately trying to change how its own genetic code works in a last-ditch effort to survive. We can see the signs from the outside. The death rattle as breathing becomes labored, the body cooling, all reflexes stopping. For all intents and purposes, the person is gone. This classic view always assumed that once the heart gives out, the brain is knocked offline, incapable of any complex or conscious experience. For decades, stories of lucid moments from people brought back from the brink were just that, stories, easily explained away by a lack of oxygen or a reaction to medication. But it turns out that simple, straight-line shutdown isn't the whole picture. Groundbreaking research is showing that the moment of death isn't a gentle fade to black. It's a flurry of activity. Scientists have found that the brain doesn't just stop. In its final seconds, it can roar to life in a way that might just explain the profound experiences people have been reporting for millennia. Section 2. The near-death experience. Near-death experiences, or NDEs, are surprisingly similar no matter where or when they happen. Survivors of cardiac arrest often talk about the same things, a feeling of profound peace with all fear of death just melting away. The sensation of leaving their body, sometimes watching from a corner of the room as doctors try to revive them. Then, there's often a tunnel, a brilliant and loving light, and even meetings with deceased relatives or spiritual figures. Some people experience a life review, where their entire life flashes before their eyes. Those who've had them often say these experiences felt realer than real, and they leave a permanent, transformative mark. For a long time, scientists were stumped. Were they just hallucinations from a brain gasping for air? Probably not. Oxygen deprivation usually causes frightening and chaotic visions, the exact opposite of the peace most people with NDEs report. Could it be a rush of feel-good endorphins, or maybe a side effect of drugs like ketamine? None of these explanations ever quite fit the complexity and sheer power of what people were describing. The question remained, how could a brain that's supposedly shutting down produce the most vivid experience of a person's life? Section 3. The climax. The brain's final surge. The answer started to appear in a series of incredible studies. While monitoring the brains of patients at the very moment of death, researchers found something they never expected. As life support was removed and the heart stopped, some patients' brains didn't go quiet. Instead, there was a massive, unexpected surge of high-frequency brainwaves, the kind known as gamma waves. This wasn't just random static. This was highly organized, coherent brain activity, the same kind we see in healthy, wide-awake brains during conscious perception, memory recall, or deep focus. One study from the University of Michigan noted a significant surge in this activity as patients died. The brain wasn't just fading out, it was lighting up in one last powerful blaze. What's even more fascinating is where this was happening. The surge lit up a region at the crossroads of the temporal, parietal, and occipital lobes, an area some scientists consider a hot zone for consciousness, though this isn't a universally accepted term. This is the same part of the brain that's active when we dream or have hallucinations. This was a game changer. It was the first real clue to a biological basis for near-death experiences. The brain, in its final moments, seems to kick off a burst of activity powerful enough to create a rich, internally generated world, a vivid, dreamlike state that could explain everything from the life review to the journey towards the light. Section 4. Deeper explanations and unanswered questions. This gamma surge is a huge piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only one. The dying brain is a busy place. Along with that electrical surge, it's believed a cocktail of neurochemicals, including endorphins, is released, which could be responsible for those feelings of peace. Other brain chemicals like serotonin and dopamine might also spike, which could help explain the vividness of the experience, though this is mainly based on animal studies and inference so far. What's more, the gamma wave activity seems to get different parts of the brain talking to each other. A lot. Specifically, areas for conscious processing start firing back and forth with areas that handle memory. This could be the mechanism behind the life review. As Dr. Ajmal Zemar, a neurosurgeon involved in one such study, put it, the brain may be playing a last recall of important life events just before we die. But here's the paradox. These clear, lucid experiences are happening when the brain is in total crisis, often with no blood flow or oxygen. Some studies have found these signs of consciousness can pop up even shortly after the heart has stopped, though how long this can last is still a major area of investigation. This messes with our basic understanding of consciousness. If the brain can generate such a rich experience while it's failing, what does that say about consciousness itself? This is where science starts to get really interesting and a little speculative. What do you think is happening in these final moments? Does this science change how you see things? Let me know in the comments. Section 5. The Quantum Frontier. Because classical neuroscience can't quite explain everything, a few scientists are turning to the weirdest field of all, quantum physics. Now, we're heading into highly speculative territory here, but it's fascinating. Theories like orchestrated objective reduction, or OR, from Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Stuart Hameroff, propose that consciousness isn't purely a product of biology. They suggest it comes from quantum processes happening inside the tiny structures within our brain cells. If that's true, then consciousness might be a fundamental part of the universe that our brain tunes into rather than creates. In that scenario, at the moment of death, the quantum information that makes up you wouldn't just vanish. It would be released back into the universe. Dr. Hameroff has suggested the gamma surge we see could be the signature of this quantum information leaving the body. Let's be clear, these ideas are not accepted by mainstream science. Critics rightly say we shouldn't just slap the weirdness of quantum mechanics onto something as complex as the brain. And while these theories are sometimes invoked to explain things like veridical NDES, where patients report details they couldn't possibly have known. There's no solid evidence for that connection. Still, they point toward a possibility that consciousness might not be completely locked inside our physical brain. Conclusion. So what really happens the moment you die? Science is showing us it's not just the lights going out. Our final moments may be defined by an incredible surge of organized brain activity, a neural last hurrah that could create a reality that is vivid, personal, and profound. For the first time, we have a scientific framework that starts to make sense of the stories of tunnels, lights, and reunions that have been told for all of human history. But in answering one question, we've opened a dozen more. This research pushes us right up against the hard problem of consciousness, the mystery of how a physical brain creates a subjective first-person experience. And ironically, the dying brain might be one of the best places to study it. We don't have all the answers. The line between a final, elaborate dream generated by the brain and the possibility of something more is still blurry. But what seems clear is that our last moments are not an empty void. They are filled with activity, with complexity, and with one final, brilliant spark of the very thing that makes us who we are. Death might not be the simple shutdown we once thought, but the final, and maybe the most extraordinary experience of life itself.